Hey everybody, my name is Mark Wade. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a jazz bass player and composer living here in New York City. Been on the scene here for about 25 years after coming to school here at New York University. I want to say thank you to Gail Boyd for having me on to talk with you guys today, talk about a few things. Um, for those of you who may have been here, I don't know, about a year and a half ago, I was on here to talk about a few things, and some things have happened since then. For those of you that don't know me, just to tell you a little bit about myself, being a bass player composer here in the city. For many years, I was a freelancer only, but back in 2015, I put out my first solo record, Event Horizon. Um, I've put out a few since then. My recent album that I've just put out, it just came out a few weeks ago, is called True Stories. It's an album that I put out with my piano trio, with Tim Harrison on piano, Scott Newman on drums. And that album was just picked as an editor's pick for Downbeat Magazine for the month of March. They were very gracious to say that the album was a living work of modern art and that I had advanced the art of jazz composition. I'm almost embarrassed to say. They did say these things. And I've had a pretty good relationship with Downbeat Magazine. I've written a number of masterclass articles for them, and you'll find me there in the readers poll. For the last 6 years, I've been very lucky to be in that poll. Now, I didn't say all this to brag or try to pump myself up here, as there are a number of people who are in that poll who are fantastic, and a number of people who are not in that poll who are equally fantastic. But to just share a little bit with you about how I ended up getting there. Like a lot of musicians here in New York City, my career was based primarily as a freelancer. I'm somebody who, as a bass player, that's obviously an easy thing to do. You're often going to be working as a sideman in people's projects, playing jazz gigs. I also play some classical gigs, and occasionally some more commercial stuff on the side, but mainly it's jazz music with some classical music thrown in there. So for many years, like I said, I just kind of subsided as a freelancer, and it was good. I made a living. I enjoyed playing music. I got to play with some nice people, and it was a good time. But it was back in 2015 when I put out my first album. I was relatively an unknown. I was totally an unknown quantity as a leader. I was not playing with any huge, big, famous people at the time. And yet that album was actually ended up being kind of a critical success, and it really did help to really advance my career to the point where I've had the recognition now from some of the publications. It's definitely helped to give me some higher profile gigs. Landed somebody who's taken me on as a client, with management, somebody who's helping to manage my career. Has also seen me recently named to the soon-to-be inaugural performance of the Annapolis Jazz and Roots Festival. Actually the artistic director. Was named as for this new festival, the Annapolis Jazz and Roots Festival, coming in November of 2022. More details on that to come. So the albums I put out actually kind of led to a really kind of kickstarting my career, kind of bringing it up a level, getting some better gigs, and getting some more exposure. And since that time, I've had a number of friends and colleagues here in New York who have asked me, "Well, how did you do it?" Because they see me on the same gigs that they're playing, and they play great, and nothing wrong with what they're doing. But how is it that, like, I managed to kind of get that stuff, and why they maybe not for them, why they maybe did not. And so I kind of wanted to share, like, some of the tips and tricks, like the story of kind of how I helped to kind of push myself forward and get out there with some other stuff, in the hopes that maybe this might be helpful to somebody. And then I can always replay this video when I get a phone call from somebody on this topic. Now, seriously, I'm always happy to share this stuff. So the when I think for all of us, look, we're all online these days quite a bit, and we see, as musicians, certainly we see people posting on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or the social media, platform of your choice. You see people's gigs, you see what they're up to, and you see them post, just, "Oh, look, here's a photo of me on the stage of Carnegie Hall, and here's a photo of me in this big, great performing arts venue, and I'm on tour with so and so." And we do one of two things: we like the photo, and then sometimes we also go, geez, why don't I have that gig, or why can't I be there, or whatnot. It's important to remember, first of all, that for all those, every time somebody posts one of those photos, there's very few of us that actually live like that every day. There are a few, right? There's people out there, big artists that tour all the time. But most of us, we might hit a run of good luck, and then we have a run of bad luck. Um, so how do we, how do we end up kind of getting to that point? What are the things you can do? Look, the first rule of thumb, I think that we always have to remember, for all of us, you, me, and anyone who's involved in this business, that the first rule of thumb is that the music's got to be great, right? You have to be great at your craft as a musician to advance your career. I firmly believe that it starts with the music being good. Now, that's the part that all of us are generally pretty comfortable with, right? We're all very accepting of. It's a given. We're all very excited about this music, that if we went into this line of work because we want to play music and we want to play at the highest possible level. So that's a given, right? No matter what else, what other steps you can take, I think it firmly starts, especially in the jazz world, with your music being at the highest possible level. But of course, there's a lot of people who are trying to play at the highest possible level. So what else can you do that can kind of help you to stand out? And this starts to get into the stuff maybe that we're not, as musicians, maybe not as um, comfortable doing, maybe not as interested in as doing. But whether you like it or not, there's a business, right? It is a music business after all. It's not just music. And so there's a bit of a game we got to play sometimes, or certain things we can do um, within that business to kind of help out our music. When I put out my first album, I was someone who was just playing bass, didn't really even have a website, it wasn't on social media, thought that people who went on social media were just bragging about stuff, and weren't really serious, or what have you. So when I put out that first record, the PR person who was handling it asked me, do you have a website? And I says, yeah, I just made one. Okay. And she says, do you have a Facebook page? I said, sure, but I don't really use it. And she says, well, what's your Twitter handle? I says, I don't have it. And then she said, well, she was not going to take me on as a client unless I had a Twitter account. And I said, why? Like, I have no interest in doing that. And she said, well, the thing is that journalists are on Twitter. And if you're not on Twitter, then you don't exist to them. That's one of the first places some people may go to look for you. And certainly now in the world of greater and greater streaming opportunities, that's another place that people will go to find you. But just to start off with social media, I was kind of forced into getting online and talking about my gigs and talking about music in the social media world. But I saw right away that there's a real advantage to doing that. When If you don't talk about your music, essentially nobody else will, right? I mean, other than if you're an internationally recognized superstar, you don't have to do much. People will talk about you because you've had a 40-year career at the highest points of music. But if you're someone like me and that doesn't necessarily fit your description, you have to do the talking for yourself first and foremost, in the hopes that eventually other people will maybe pick up the ball and run with it as well. If you're lucky enough to get some people interested in your music, maybe they will, but it has to start with you. So as much as it may be uncomfortable to do it, you have to try to give that a try. You have to try to put something of what you're doing online. You don't have to brag. You don't have to pour it on too thick. But having a presence online, particularly on social media, is super important. If you're from a younger generation, that's probably super comfortable doing that. You're doing it already. Not everybody who's younger does it, but predominantly younger people have an easier time with it. If you're more middle-aged or older, it may not be your cup of tea. But for me, it was a great advantage. It was something that not only was I getting hits with the new album from the publicist I hired, but I found that I could go out and get reviews from myself. And in fact, journalists and radio stations sometimes really love hearing directly from the artist because they're always dealing with PR people pitching them records. A lot of these people, it's important to remember that journalists and radio people went into the line of work they went to not to make money, because they don't get paid anything and they're not making any money. We always think as musicians, it's tough, it's hard to make a living, hard to make money. Trust me, the folks who are on the other side of it, the journalists and the radio people, they ain't making any money either. They're doing it because they love the music too. So you may find that if you're nice about reaching out to these people, they may reach back, right? They may reach back. And for me, I found that a very empowering tool, both through Facebook, but really through Twitter, to reach journalists, and actually internet radio stations increasingly. online with Twitter accounts. It's a great way to reach out to people and reach out to places beyond your geographic area, right? As musicians, we tend to think about going to hang out at the club and hang out with that guy and go see that, and that's all great. But if you want to get outside of your geographic footprint, uh, going online is a really easy way to do that. It's a really effective way. I just posted an interview I did today with a radio program down in Johannesburg, South Africa. Not because I've flown down there, or not because I played any festivals down there, but uh, I've actually been able to contact a number of journalists and radio stations there with my albums over the years, and I've been able to at least carve out the beginning of a presence in some people's minds in for audiences in South Africa. It's a start, right? It's not going from 0 to 100. It's going from 0 to 1, and then 2 and 3, etc. I mean, it's a process, for sure. But I've had success doing that, and it's something that's been very empowering for me and very beneficial, um, to think that way. So, you know, if you are really considering trying to grow your brand just outside of playing your freelance gigs or putting out a record and then having it sit under your bed and collect dust, you have to at least make an effort to go out there and promote it. Uh, Anybody who's gone down that road knows that promotion, paid promotion, if you're hiring a publicist for print reviews, if you're hiring a publicist for radio, that those things are expensive, right? They're costly. Just making an album is very expensive by itself. The studio time is expensive. Paying the people on the record what they should get paid is expensive, right? All of it is a lot of money. I'm not going to lie, and I'm not saying it's easy. Um, but having people who are going to be involved with that can open some doors for you. Because while I have been able to get my album a lot of places through just my own legwork of reaching out to people and through social media, I know that there's some pretty nice things that I've gotten I would not have gotten without a paid publicist. That's just the reality. The reason you go to those people isn't because they're going to make everything better for you or just revolutionize your career, but it's because they have contacts at certain big things like Downbeat Magazine, which is how I got in there initially. It wasn't because they weren't really interested in my debut album so much if it had come from me, but because I had a publicist who had a connection there. That was the entree. Again, the music's got to do the talking, right? A publicist can get you through the door, but it's got to be a project that is worth putting out there. And so, because it is so much money to mount those campaigns, and because most of us can't afford to do that on a regular basis, um, you have to kind of pick and choose, pick your battles as to when you're going to kind of get behind a project. I think if you really go into the studio and you come out and you think like, wow, this album, like I really believe in this album. I think this album is really great. I don't know what other people are going to say. But I really believe in it. Not just, well, it'll be okay, or well, maybe they won't listen to track 5, or well, track 2 sounded really good. But if you really believe in the project and you really think it's solid, I think that's the time to consider going all in. Go all in with pushing it out there on social media yourself, and maybe finding a way financially to fund that project for PR, for radio and or print. Both are expensive. Both together are a lot more expensive. Um, Something to think about. If you're not sure, like, well, do I do it? Should I do it? Is this worth it? Just look around at your peers, see who's getting reviewed by whom, what their music sounds like. Are you at that level? Are you past that level? Are you maybe not at that level? It can sometimes kind of give you a good reality check, as to whether or not now's the time to really push like that, or maybe not. Maybe not. If you come out of the studio saying, it's okay but not great, don't go all in. Maybe wait for the next one. The most important thing is that you have to believe in the music you're putting out there, because if you don't, no one else will. My wife has worked in PR, not in the music business, but just in communications in general, and PR has been part of her portfolio. And the first thing that a professional PR person will tell you is that there are no guaranteed results, right? Even if the project is great, there's never a guarantee that people are going to listen to the album first of all, and then be like it. These journalists are just snowed under with CDs. Just an avalanche of CDs come at them all the time. And even people who have reviewed you in the past sometimes won't review you a second time, even if they loved your album. mean, I've had people, pick the album as one of their best albums of the year, and the next time around, you can't get them to return your phone call, not because they don't like you now suddenly. They do. If they reviewed you before, it means they really liked your music. Sometimes it just means they're busy. And as much as we want our album to be a priority for everyone, the reality is there's a lot of music out there. So um, you got to pick your battles. And the wider your net is of journalists that you have a relationship that you can reach out to, the more likely that you'll get decent coverage, because they're not all going to cover it every single time. It's not personal. I'm lucky enough that I have some decent relationships with some people who have reviewed me, so that I can have a conversation with them, or they can explain, like, hey, I have a stack of 40 CDs sitting on my desk, and I'm like 3 weeks behind in getting these things out to these publications, and yours is in the pile, and I'll get to it when I can. That's the most you can, the most you can ask. Uh, Pardon me. Uh, so, so that's a way to start to kind of raise your profile. If you can, at least, if you're going from freelancer, no album, and trying to then have an album, and have that build your career, I think the first place you want to start with, yeah, pardon me, I got tested. It's not COVID, thank God. Just a scratchy throat. You know, let's see here. Oh, yes. So, one of the things that is going to help, the first thing you can do to help kind of raise your profile, is to get those reviews, right? Reviews and radio play, especially if you can push your album up far enough to chart. But reviews are really nice things, I feel like, because once it's in print, there it is. It's there forever. So if you can get one person to say one nice thing about you, those third party endorsements are, I think they're super helpful, right? They don't just turn your career around or revolutionize everything, but you have to have something, something that someone else other than you or your mom, or your significant other, who said, oh yeah, so and so is really good at music. That third party endorsement is important. So I would really recommend trying to find ways to get that for yourself. Once you have those third party endorsements, then you got to do something with them. I think the typical thing is, I have my quotes. I send it to the local club, and they don't know me, and they see the quotes, and they don't return my call. And you say, well, what good was all of that for? Well, it's a process, right? It's having one or two reviews or a bunch of reviews, does not by itself just like launch a career. It's really a cumulative effort that you're trying to put together over time, and create a track record, so that you can get to a point with some big enough, accolades or whatnot. Then when people finally say, well, geez, if so and so said that about this guy or this lady, I have to look at it at least, right? And in the end, that's all you're really looking for. You're looking for someone to at least listen to it and give it a try, and that's the best you can hope for. Um, for instance, uh, so I'm pretty active on Twitter, and I was posting stuff about my new album. I ended up in a conversation with the guy who was the former minister of culture for the country of Brazil, like the whole country. He was the top government guy in turn, head of culture, and he loved my music. He listened to the album, and he loved it. And I ended up getting in a conversation with him. He referred me to a friend of his down there who might have use for the band. Um, and maybe we'll be able to go down and play there, but maybe not. That I'm right in the middle of this stuff, and I'll keep you posted if I get the gig. But that's all you can really hope for. If the guy listens to the album and he doesn't like the band, then he doesn't like the band. I'm not going to apologize for my music, but I'm not going to. There's no rule that says that he has to like it either. Um, all of these, all of these attempts at getting your stuff online and getting people to talk, hopefully getting other people to talk about your music, getting them excited about your music, is really just so that people will stop for 5 minutes and listen and give it a try. There was a time, say about 30 years ago, when record labels controlled all the access to music. There was no at-home recording was not really a thing. Being able to produce and manufacture albums and distribute them was not a thing. So we ended up listening to whatever the labels, would sign and put out there. And people would often complain that, well, the labels control all this stuff. And, if they just gave me a chance, if people just heard my music, then then they would like it, and I'd be off to the races. Fast forward 30 years, we have the opposite problem now, is that anyone can release an album. Anyone can put it out through CD Baby. Anyone can self-release an album. Anyone can record at home. And if you have at least a few decent microphones and a decent setup, you can come up with something halfway decent. So the opposite is that there's just such a flood of music out there. Getting someone to listen to you is the real challenge, right? Past building your craft, being awesome at music, having something of worthwhile to say, all of that kind of stuff. Obviously, that's a given. Once you get there, you find that there's a lot of other people who are standing in that same room that you work so hard to get to. So, almost think of it like a crowded marketplace where everybody is screaming and jumping up and down, waving their wares, trying to get somebody to come by the booth and buy. How do you do that? How do you get someone there? So, again, social media is a great way to reach people. I think in that way, obviously, and this is not to in any way diminish personal human contact is always super important, right? We've always had that, and I think as musicians, it's the first thing we go to: hang out at someone's gig, hang around this person, hang around that person, make that connection. That'll never go away. That'll always be important. The physical touch, the physical presence with someone, always super important. But that's not enough, I would say, these days. And more people make decisions about you increasingly online and not in person. And I think adjusting to that world is a really important thing for us to continue to kind of grow and progress with the way that the business is going. Look, online stuff is not been super great to the music business, right? Streaming is terrible. Is being able to just, go on YouTube or Spotify and stream someone's album. It's a great way to have access to the music, right? And it's a great way for me to have someone check out my music in a very easy way. The guy down in South America who's hopefully will listen to the music, the first thing he asks for is a Spotify link. So as much as we may hate those things, they do make it easier for people to reach our music, but they're not great as far as sustaining a career, right? They don't pay us any money, where in the past someone had to plunk down $20 for a CD or an album. Now they can stream it, and instead of me getting that $20 or maybe $10 because the record company takes half, I get 1/100 of a penny, right? So streaming is tough, but it is, whether we like it or not, it's increasingly where people can get our first impressions from us, and where they make decisions about whether or not they're interested in our art and interested in our craft, whether they want to come to a concert, whether they want to hire us for a concert, those kinds of things. So I subscribe to the "if you can't beat them, join them," and I know that there'll be some people who listen to this who will feel differently about that, and I totally respect your feelings about it. I get it. I think a lot of us don't maybe love that situation, but I'm taking the tact, at least, of using the situation in front of me and trying to make the best of it. Again, if you disagree with that, I totally respect your opinion, and I know how you got there. Believe me, I think we all do. We all know how that can come about. So if you can get those, if you can get out there on social media, if you can get a presence, if you can get some reviews, if you have something to talk about, that's, I think, a key thing using social media, is that it's not posting photos of your dinner. It's not ranting about the latest political, thing of the day, as tempting as that may be at times. Some of the best advice I got when it came to social media is, well, first of all, if you're new to it, or even if you're not and you're looking to try to up your game, you want to go and look at people who are successful on social media, people who you feel are successful, people who are maybe your peers or whose peer group you're looking to join, and look to see how they post and what they talk about and how all that works. Some people can get away with some pretty extreme, viewpoints that they'll put out on social media. But by and large, I think good advice that I had heard is that think of your social media like a television channel, right? So if you turn on the History Channel, you're expecting to see at least something about history, right? It might be history on this subject or that subject, but there's a ballpark expectation of what you're going to find. And if you go to that channel, let's say you turn on the History Channel, but it's a cooking show, and you're not interested in cooking shows, you're going to turn that channel off. and you're probably not going to go back to it if you're looking for that subject that you don't find there that you thought you would find there. And so your social media is kind of like that in a way. If people are coming, if you're using social media for your professional, endeavors, if you're trying to use it to get your music out there, I think it's very helpful if 90% of your output is about that subject, right? Even if you don't have a gig every day to put out there, and that's obnoxious to put it out that much anyways. You got to find a balance with those things. You want things to be about music. Talk about music, your music, but talk about other people's music. Like congratulate other people. Like this is all networking, and also just a nice thing to do if you actually like people's music. People like it when they say nice things about their music if it's genuine. Just be genuine. You don't have to be phony or do any of that stuff. If you don't like the music, you don't have to say anything. But a lot of good music out there. You can get involved with other people that way. It's a nice way to start a conversation. But if you have that idea of maintaining that like a discipline about how you use your social media, using it as a channel, so that when people tune in to my Twitter account, they're going to see something related to jazz. Could be my music, could be someone else's music. I might be going to see someone else's music, and I post it there on social media to maybe give them a little credit. It's just a nice thing to do. It's so easy to do. And it costs you nothing. And it's just a nice gesture to do that for other people. And then you're not sitting there just talking about yourself all the whole time, because then you look like a jerk. You don't want to do that. Definitely want to, keep it general. And if you want to include some personal stuff, that's up to you. I mean, it's all just a rule of thumb of what you're comfortable with. But if your entire Twitter feed is, retweeting stuff or talking about stuff that's unrelated to that, people won't go there to look for music. And if that was your goal in the first place, it's not a great thing. And they also might not, especially if they don't know you. It's different if you go to see if it's a big personality, maybe somebody who's already internationally famous. They can write whatever they want because people know them for their music already. But if they don't already know you for your music, you have to introduce yourself. And you're kind of social media is almost a way of reintroducing yourself every day, to people who might be listening about what you're about and what you're doing. It isn't just your 5 friends and your parents that are watching you there sometimes, especially if you can have some success growing your following online. You'd be surprised who is watching and listening. And that's really ultimately what we're there for. It's not to catch the people that already know you. It's to catch those folks that don't know you yet, and try to spread the word, spread the good word about your music and about what you're up to. My connections through social media, like I said, it's gotten me radio stations. It's gotten me reviews. It's gotten me, but then it's also gotten me real work. Because I'll have this conversation with musicians, and they're like, well, what does it really do for you in the real world? Well, it's connected me to musicians who are overseas. It's connected me to concert promoters who are overseas. Social media ultimately led to me getting out on the road, going to Europe, playing in the UK, putting together tours and concerts, specifically and solely through connections I made originally online that eventually became connections I made in the real world. And that is a powerful tool, right? It's a powerful tool so that you're not just sitting here in your bedroom, in your living room, you got your music in hand, to take that step to go from like having that great album to turning that into something where it starts to actually make a difference for you, out in the real world is a powerful tool. It's something that you should consider. Again, if you're not into that kind of stuff, I was not into that kind of stuff. I thought I would never be into that kind of stuff. I think when I saw social media not as a platform to just air my business in public, but to use it as a tool. If you can use it as a focus tool, it becomes something that really can work for you and can do something nice for you. I think, for me, like being in the Downbeat Readers Poll, I'm not an international household name like some of the people on that list. I mean, it's a complete honor every time to be on that list. But some of the people voting for me, I know they're not people I know. I see the final results, and yeah, I get my friends to, I bug them every year to fill out the ballot and do all that stuff. But the I know that I'm not really I'm getting people, I'm reaching people who I don't know, and I don't know, I won't maybe ever know who those people are, but they do know me, and that little bit is at least something that has helped raise my profile over the years. It's a lot of work. Sometimes it's thankless. You got to keep feeding the beast with all the online stuff, but it can have real tangible results for your career. So I hope some of that was helpful. I hope some of that was something that can maybe make a difference for you, down the road if you're doing this stuff. I've had this conversation with a number of people who who have asked me about, well, how did you get into downbeat? How did you do this? How did you get over there? And that's kind of the gist of it. So thank you very much for listening. If you would like to hear this album that I have been talking about, the new album is called True Stories, and that is on my website, markwademusicny.com, or if you just Google me. Google has been kind to me lately. I'm the first thing that comes up in the search engine, so I'm pretty easy to find. You can hear clips of the record there, past albums, a whole bunch of other stuff, and upcoming events. So I want to again say thank you very much to Gail Boyd for having me on here for the talk today. This has been a really great platform for a lot of people. I've seen a number of things here that's been very useful for me. I hope this has been useful for you. Thank you very much.